Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Samuel, founder of a revolutionary medical sales training and mentorship program called the Medical Sales Career Builder, and I'm also host of the Medical Sales Podcast. In this podcast, I interview top medical sales reps and leading medical sales executives across the entire world. It doesn't matter what medical sales industry, from medical device to pharmaceutical to genetic testing and diagnostic lab, you name it, you will learn how to either break into the industry, be a top 10% performer within your role, or climb the corporate ladder. Welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. And remember, I am a medical sales expert sharing my own opinion about this amazing industry and how it can change your life. Rashago, go ahead and tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Yeah. My name is Rashago Kemp. I'm a regional director. I work in the biologics medical space. Regional director is someone that's basically responsible for working with W-2 employees or independent contracted employees, sales employees to build the company's portfolio in a particular area. So right now I cover about a third of the United States in my current role. And so a lot of kind of the Midwest and some of the West with some of the southern states. Historically, I've covered, in my previous role, I covered the Northwest.
Okay. So what space are we in here? What are we talking about?
So we're in wound care specifically, and I'm in biologics. So we use amniotic tissue to heal hard to heal wounds, both in the private office space, but also in the hospitals and in the ORs. So it's a multi-call point call.
Okay.
With regenerative medicine. So no biologics, no quote unquote devices. It's all human tissue.
Okay, so we've got to break that down. We have people listening right now that are like, amniotic what? So go ahead and give us the science. What are we talking about exactly? What kind of patients experience this and what kind of doctors are utilizing this?
Yeah, so amniotic tissue is awesome because it comes from Mother Nature. And as I say to a lot of my doctors, is we're using Mother Nature to heal Mother Nature. So we've got these patients, let's paint a picture of the problem first. We've got patients that are out there that are diabetic, that have a lot of comorbidities, they're overweight, they're elderly, they're malnutrition, they're patients that are going under radiation because they have cancer, and their immune systems just don't work the way a healthy person's immune system does. So when me or you have some type of a traumatic injury or an ulceration that's caused by trauma, our bodies are going to go through a normal healing process and our bodies are going to heal it. We're going to get fixed. And that's what happens with normal people. But with these other patients that don't, their immune system lacks the ability to do that. And so what they'll end up having is they'll have some type of a traumatic ulceration that happens or something that's pressure related. People that are diabetic, they may have neuropathy where they can't feel their feet. And so they can't feel that when they've injured themselves, or when we shift our weight from, foot to foot, because that's our body signaling to us there's too much pressure in a particular area. It's going to blood flow and you're going to cause the tissue to die. They don't feel that. And so it causes these ulcerations and these holes in their feet that don't heal. They literally just stay open and they won't heal. And so oftentimes they'll go into a provider, a wound care center, or some type of doctor, and they'll try and clean that wound up and help it to heal. But because their bodies don't work like yours and I's, even with good basic wound care, these wounds won't heal on their own. And so they need some type of an intervention. So one of the great products that's shown to be really effective in this area is amniotic tissue. It's human amniotic tissue. We get it from scheduled C-sections. It's not secondary to any type of abortions or anything. You have to have a healthy birth and a healthy mother. But the reason why we use amniotic tissue is all other tissue that's out there, as you probably know, if you get a transplant from someone like a kidney or a liver, you have to blood match, right? Your body doesn't reject it. And even then, your body may reject it because it's still foreign. What makes amniotic tissue really cool is it protects the baby from the mom and the mom from the baby because it's all around the baby. It is Mother Nature has made it neutral. It doesn't have any antigens that actually cause the body to reject it. And then it's also has all these great growth factors and things that help promote the growth of a human child. So there's all this. So it has all this rich, really good stuff that helps make human tissue, and it won't cause any type of rejection. And so it's the perfect tissue to use to help patients that don't have immune systems that work. So the way that doctors will actually utilize this, and I'll show you what it looks like. It's pretty flattering.
Yeah.
But we'll take the tissue and we'll process it, and then we'll dehydrate it in a form that looks like this. It's like almost like tissue paper.
Right.
So what a doctor will do is they'll go and they'll clean that wound up, and then they'll take this and they'll place it in the wound, and it will dissolve over 3 to 5 days. And when it dissolves in that wound, it will release all these growth factors that will actually augment and turn on the patient's immune system to a state where it now works. And it's now
Wow.
sending stem cells to the area, and sending
Wow.
resources to the area, and it's acting like a healthy body again,
Okay.
and it will help heal that wound. Now, these need to be applied weekly, and they'll be applied weekly to closure, but they have tremendous results. One of the biggest examples, probably 3 or 4 years ago, I had a patient that had a venous leg ulcer, which is a very painful chronic ulcer, and he'd had it for 20 years, and he had been going to the same wound care center for 10. And when we introduced this product to that wound care center and they tried it, the doc's like, okay, I've got this one patient. This is the hardest. If the product works on this, they'll work on anything. And so I'm like, okay, let's try it. And so we applied it to this patient. In 6 months, they healed. So they've been coming to that wound care center for 10 years. And in 6 months,
Wow. Okay.
the
Okay.
product made the difference. So it's a really cool product. And it's great because it never does any harm. It can't hurt anyone.
Yeah.
So it's really fun to be associated with something that, that works so well and has such great results.
Okay, I have a couple questions here.
Yeah.
What is the most common situation that demands this kind of solution?
So the most common situation is well, in terms of common for the patients or common in terms
For the
of
patients, like what are patients typically going through that you see the most often, that the physicians you call on see the most often?
Yeah, so probably two types of patients that we see quite often.
Okay.
Kind of an academic. One is diabetic patients, specifically diabetic foot ulcers. And the reason why diabetic foot ulcers are an issue is, again, when you're diabetic, especially if your sugar control is out of whack, again, it makes it very hard for your body to heal itself.
Sure.
And then two, those patients also often have neuropathy, as I described before, which doesn't allow them to feel their legs.
Right.
So when you get those two things in tandem, it increases a high likelihood that you're going to have diabetic foot ulcers. In fact, patients that have diabetes, I think the last statistic said about 1 out of 5 patients that have diabetes will develop a diabetic foot ulcer.
Wow.
In addition to that, having an ulcer on your foot is also the worst place. One of the reasons why it's the worst place is because, one, you're walking on it, so there's constant pressure.
Yeah.
And two, it's the furthest away from all of your body's resources. So your heart and everything else, blood flow becomes an issue as well.
Sure.
Lots of times diabetics will suffer from a hardening of their vessels, their blood vessels. And so the blood that pumps to their extremities is lower than the blood that blood goes everywhere else. And if
Right.
you have a circumstance where you're not getting blood flow to your extremities, you're also not going to heal your wound.
Gotcha.
So diabetic foot ulcers are very common. The second most common type of wound is what's called the venous leg ulcer. And venous leg ulcers are for patients that don't have venous systems that work appropriately, and they'll get them on their legs, usually, on their calf above their ankle. And they can be small, but they can also be really large. They're painful, but they're shallow, but they tend to stick around for a very long time. And again, that was the type of wound I described earlier that was 20 years old. He was a leg ulcer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are the two most common. The third most common is a pressure ulcer, and those are patients that are like paraplegics or they're bedbound. You probably heard of sores.
Yeah. Yep.
That's a pressure ulcer. So someone can't reposition themselves because they're too sick, or they don't have the ability to. Your body stays in the same position, and when it stays, there's certain pressure points on your body. You have your sacrum, your coccyx, and your ITs, usually around the hips, where you have bony prominences, and that pressure being in that consistent state without being repositioned,
Right.
causes you to die. And so that's the third most common.
Okay. So what this solution is doing is, normally without this solution, these wounds are not healing.
Correct. Especially if the patients are not healthy. If the patients are healthy and we can alleviate the pressure and do a couple other things, the patient will heal in due course. But if the patients are unhealthy and they don't have good immune systems that will heal themselves, they just won't heal. And what will end up happening is, like with diabetic foot ulcers, it usually ends to, every time you have an open ulcer, it's a portal for bacteria to get into your body.
And that's what leads to like getting amputated and all that stuff.
And when you get to an amputation, there is good data on this. If you have a minor amputation, your 5-year mortality, as you probably know, like in cancer, they calculate if you're a cancer survivor based on 5 years, right? And so if you get past the 5 years, you're a cancer survivor, but they calculate mortality rates that way. And so if you get an amputation, your mortality rate, even if it's a small one, is 46%. And so it's a big deal. And now
so what explains that?
So it's a correlation rather than a causation.
Okay.
And so let me put it this way. Let's say you're a diabetic. And again, most people are type 2 diabetics, which means that they've often been exposed to too many carbohydrates over the years because of our modern diets, and their bodies become insulin resistant and they develop diabetes. And so it happens to us. I'm half African American, and it happens to people from African American descent because their genetics haven't been exposed to carbohydrates like other people. And so we actually have a higher, my dad's a diabetic. A lot of my family, all my older family is all diabetic. Wow. It's because of this genetic history. We come and have a modern diet and our genetics aren't adjusted. And so we developed diabetes fairly quickly. And so, oh gosh, I'm losing my train of thought.
You were breaking down what happens when this is not treated.
Oh yes, when it's not treated.
And then now you're taking me down that journey.
So the reason I was going in this direction. So if you have an amputation, let's say you have part of your foot taken away or all of your foot, one of the issues, what happens? You become more active or less active?
I mean, less active, obviously.
Less active. And so if you're less active, do you think you become more depressed or less depressed?
More depressed. So
what it ends up becoming a cascading event, because one of the issues with diabetics is they don't control their blood sugars. And one of the key things in controlling your blood sugar is, and of course, diet, but also physical activity.
Wow.
If you can be physically active, your body burns up sugars first.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you can't. You had a foot and you could go walk around the neighborhood for your exercise, and now you've been amputated, and now it's a lot harder to go walk around.
Right.
And now you're not walking around, you're sitting around watching TV more.
Right.
You're more depressed, and you're more likely to eat, some more cookies, more chips. And compounds.
Yeah.
So it's a correlation. So it's not causation. You didn't die because you had your toe or your foot removed, but it's because of because of the cascading effect that happens from that. So if we can intervene and stop you from having any type of amputations and keep all of your extremities with you, you're much more likely to be less depressed and to be more physically active, which is with all of your other health indications.
So we all know about diabetes, right? And we know about, and I like to believe that the world is just more informed about how to prevent type 2 diabetes, getting more active around doing something about it. You hear about pre-diabetics finally stepping into action, the weight crisis in America and what we're doing to get around that. But how common is it? How common is it that people are getting limbs amputated due to things like this? Is it a very small fraction? Is it way more common than we realize? I mean, what's really going on?
Yeah, it's becoming more common.
So it's becoming more common.
Yeah, unfortunately, so it's interesting because, again, we're having more access to good information.
Right.
But we also have more access to, garbage food. And we also live in a technological society where we don't have to do as much physically as we do in the past.
Sure. Yeah.
Living a modern lifestyle that doesn't require physical activity and has easy access to cheap, low quality food. So those so unless you're really proactive about your health, if you are proactive, you're not going to go in those directions. But if you're not, but it's pretty easy for you to have a scenario where, someone grows up fairly active, let's say they're an athlete in high school, and then they get married and then they get a desk job. And then all of a sudden they work at a desk all day long and they're too busy to make a good quality.
Sure.
They're just going to fast food.
Sure.
Or they're doing Uber Eats or whatever.
Yeah.
This over years, and let's say growing up, you never had problems gaining weight. Like you were a skinny kid growing up, you're always active. And so you have that mentality. And then as you get older, your body starts to catch up to you, but it does it slowly over time. And by the time you're in your mid 40s, all of a sudden you're 50 pounds overweight, and now you're pre-diabetic or you're diabetic, and it really happened to you kind of without you even noticing.
Wow. Yeah.
For an example, he was in his early 40s when he got diabetes. It happened at a time when life was hectic and crazy. He wasn't able to go to the gym like he normally did. And his diet slipped a little bit. And all of a sudden, boom, he's a type 2 diabetic.
Wow.
Just kind of creeped up on.
I hope you're enjoying today's episode. And I want to let you know our programs cover the entire career of a medical sales professional. From getting into the medical sales industry, to training on how to be a top performer in the medical sales industry, to masterfully navigating your career to executive level leadership. These programs are personalized and customized for your specific career and background, and trained by over 50 experts, including surgeons. Our results speak for ourselves, and we're landing positions for our candidates in less than 120 days in top medical technology companies like Stryker, Medtronic, Merck, Abbott, you name it. Would you run an Ironman race without training and a strategy? You wouldn't. So why are you trying to do the same with the medical sales position? You need training, you need a strategy, and you need to visit evolveyoursuccess.com, fill out the application, schedule some time with one of our account executives, and let's get you into the position that you've always dreamed of.
So this is like taking us down the rabbit hole, but we got to do it. So you're telling me that amputations is increasing, like the amount of amputations happening is increasing.
Yeah, it's still increasing, unfortunately. And we saw an increase actually with 2020, and that was easily explainable because one, everyone was trapped in their houses, everyone was
COVID,
isolated, and they also couldn't get into good medical care.
Sure.
So we saw a spike. Now that we have come down from that spike, it is coming down. Hopefully we can continue to come down, but modern life is still a challenge, right?
Okay.
So the challenge that people have access to low quality food and are less active than they were before. Even though we have plenty of gyms, but again, you have to be really proactive about your health these days. It used to be, in the 50s, like when our parents were growing up, you were healthy by default. Because you're running around, you're doing stuff.
Right. It's part of life. It's part of life to be that active.
You're active.
Yeah.
Today you're just not. Yeah.
Wow. And it's getting worse for obvious reasons. Okay. So that makes sense. But let's go back to diabetes then, because diabetes is not reversible.
So it's very manageable. And it's some people would say it's reversible. So most people, the way that you measure classic diabetes diagnosis is by the A1C test. Which is a blood test they do that tests where your blood sugar level is over approximately a 3-month period. Now, if you're considered someone that has diabetes, is if you have an A1C, I believe over 6.
Okay.
You're pre-diabetic if you're 0.5 to 0.6.
Okay.
And so you can check this level. So you can be a diabetic who's had a higher A1C, let's say a 8 or 9, and you could manage it with exercise and with diet, and you could bring your A1C down under 6.
So that's not considered reversing it.
So it's not. It's fully managed because what's happened is your body is insulin resistant, or your pancreas is not producing enough insulin for your body to control, and so oftentimes that doesn't fully reverse. Now there have been some people that have, through lifestyle, of claim that it has been reversed, and there's been some documented cases of it. But as a general, the medical community generally says, once you're diabetic, you're generally not undiabetic. But you can manage it. And again, if you can bring your sugars down to a healthy control, especially if you can do it without medication, so just your diet and exercise, if you can do that, you, for all intents and purposes, don't have diabetes. But you have to be very stalwart. So you have to be very conscious about a low-carb diet, and you have to be very conscious about constantly, being physically active. You have to be much more conscious than someone who, let's say, doesn't have diabetes. So that would be the difference. So you could have a non-diabetic life, with someone who's been diagnosed as diabetic with diabetes, as long as you're really proactive.
Okay. So going back then to your solution. So now you have this patient that's in a compromised situation. Their wounds are not healing. How many applications of your solution does it take to get them back to, I guess, whatever is considered normal?
Yeah, so it's really going to depend on a few factors. Number one factor is going to depend on how big is the wound that we're talking about. So, common size wounds are anywhere from 3 to 8 square centimeters. That's, like anywhere from a dime to a $50.
Sure.
Now, I have seen wounds specifically, I've seen wounds that have been hundreds of square centimeters. And these are typically for patients that have venous leg ulcers or traumatic wounds where they cover a large surface area. Now, obviously, the larger the wound, the longer it's going to take for a product to work. So I would say the average is between 5 and 10 applications. Is what
and it's an application every
week.
Every week. So 5 to 10 weeks are when these are expected to heal. And then does this, from your experience, does this motivate the patient to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to do it differently now? Or does it really not have that kind of impact?
So I would say generally, yes.
Okay.
And so it also helps with patients' compliance, because especially with wounds that have a pressure element to it, it's actually really important that the patient be compliant to what the provider or the doctor is asking them to do. Because let's say you have an ulcer on the bottom of your foot. One of the things that contributes to that ulcer is your constant walking on it. And so a lot of providers will provide like a walking boot, or they'll do some type of total contact cast that actually creates an off-road point or space where that ulcer is. So you're not constantly putting pressure on it. So if a patient is compliant, so here's a real life circumstance. So I work with a doc that put a patient in an offloading boot, right? And instructing them, hey, I need you to wear this to help augment the pressure at the bottom of your foot. And the patient's like, sure, I'll wear this. So I, as a sales rep, was there, and I support the use of the product with the provider. So I would come to the appointments every week. That's pretty common for our industry, where you come and you support the providers and the patient. But it's funny, there's windows at the clinic, and we could see this patient drive in, and the patient would drive in, and we'd see the patient get out of his car holding his walking boot in normal shoes. The patient would walk across the parking lot, sit on a bench, put on his walking boot.
Oh no!
And walk into the clinic.
Oh no!
Yeah, and the doc says, "Hey Bob, you've been wearing your boot all week." "Oh, I've been wearing it all week." And then we look at the bottom of his foot. Is like, your wound hasn't gotten any better this week. What do you think's happening? I don't know, doc. The patient wants to get healed, but not enough, because he's embarrassed by the walking boot. The walking boot says, I have a problem. He doesn't want to say that.
Yeah.
Maybe he finds it uncomfortable. And he also doesn't fully understand that having a hole in the bottom of your foot could really affect other things. Like it really we could have to cut your foot off. Like, people don't think that, but that's a real possibility.
Now, do you hear the doctors explain that, or no?
Yeah, they do. We do explain that, and some are better than others, obviously. Just like some will really lean into it and be like, "Hey, we're talking about life and death here," and some will be like, "No, I really just recommend this." And so it kind of depends on the doctor's approach. But some patients, at the end of the day, just like in everything, the patients care more about it than others.
Right.
And some patients think that oh, it won't happen.
It won't happen to me. Yeah. It is what it is. So do you counsel the patients, you and the patient, and they tell you things they don't tell the doctor, or are you only talking to the patient when the doctor is present?
So oftentimes that would be as a rep, that would be one of my value adds, is because I would actually build a relationship with
the patient.
Patients and sometimes it would even be closer than the relationship with the doctor.
Right.
So it was always make it a point to get in there, connect with them, and then to further add to the compliance framework. And so then you'd be like, hey, you know what? We're using this product, and it's not cheap. Your insurance is going to pay for it, but your insurance may only pay for so many applications. So for this to really work, we're going to really need you to be even more on top of your compliance than you were before, because this is actually the best shot to get you healed. And we want to make sure that happens. So oftentimes we could use that little extra oomph to get patients that weren't compliant to be more compliant. Especially since this product, when you use this product, most insurances won't let you use it day one. You've got to have a patient that's been established as a patient that has had a wound for a while, and you've established that they're a slow healer.
Yeah.
No, so it's a step up treatment. And so oftentimes the patient has probably already been coming in for visits for a minimum of a month, but more likely, 3, 4, maybe even 12 months, or in some cases, as that patient I showed you before, 10 years.
Right.
So they're kind of getting sick of this, right? And they want to get healed.
Motivated.
We can introduce this new solution to help shorten the time frame to healing. You'll see it. And we would often see this, especially when patients had milestone things, like maybe they've got a vacation. They want to get ready. I got to get healed.
Yeah, they want to be tip
Or-
top.
Yeah, or I got Christmas coming up,
Exactly.
yes. And we would often see when a patient would have a deadline in their future, we would actually see an increase in healing, regardless of what we're doing.
Oh, wow.
Be very compliant with everything that we said.
Sure.
They had a goal that they wanted to get healed.
Sure.
And so,
Yeah, that's a cool realization. Okay, so, because you've seen so much of this, and it sounds like you've just dealt the full gamut of what goes on in this space, take us to a time where you were just like, whoa, this is what I do. Oh my goodness. Wow. Like, give us that moment. For those people listening right now that just are still trying to grasp what it is you do. I don't know if it's your most extreme or at least most surreal for you, where you kind of recognize that this is serious work you're doing, and you there's no other way you'd be in a situation like this. Give us the time that you.
I'd probably say it was when I've been in this industry for 8 years. It'd probably be the second year I was in this industry.
Okay.
As in most medical sales, it takes a while to build relationships and to really understand what you're doing, especially when you go into a new space, right? At least for me, it usually takes me 6 months to a year to really get confident in doing what I'm doing. And then, of course, it takes some time to build relationships. And what we do in this space is very relationship driven. And I would say that, my first year was a tough year. It didn't sell a ton. In fact, my first month, I didn't sell it. I got the issue, didn't sell a darn thing.
Sure.
And then my second year, I was a President's Club winner. And so everything flipped, but it flipped that spring when I had put in enough work to understand what I was doing. And I'd also put in enough work with my relationships to where people knew and trusted me and I was capable. And it probably got to a point where I had a biggest wound care clinic in the state that I was working with. I had been working with them hard, and they weren't doing a lot of work. And I finally got to the point where I was a good enough rep, and that they trusted me, that they all of a sudden, it just switched, and they were just using product left and right. In fact, I would go there once or twice a week and spend the entire day, and they would just products to patients. And what's great is that I'd see the products change these patients' lives.
Yeah, I believe it.
It was the perfect intersection of, I'm seeing that product change patients' life, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to help patients heal, and that was super satisfactory on one end. And then number two, I was seeing these great relationships I was having with the medical professionals, where they were talking to me about their kids and their personal lives. We were like genuinely
bringing you inside the circle.
Exactly. And I was viewed as part of the team. I was there so much. I was just like part of the team. Like even though I didn't work there, I was a vendor. They viewed me as Rashago's part of the team. And then, third with that is my sales skyrocketed. So financially, it was great at the same time. So I hit that trifecta, helping my relationships, and then killing it in my career from a number standpoint. That was like, wow, this is really cool.
That is amazing. That is amazing. Wow. Any experiences where it was just crazy as far as what the patient was experiencing?
So from a negative standpoint or from a positive standpoint, or both?
Give us both.
Yeah.
This is the podcast. We bring it all on the table here.
Yeah. There's always, some of my favorite things is when we see patients that, are in a really bad situation and just really frustrated, right?
Sure.
I go back to the patient that had been there going to the clinic for 10 years, and like he was almost showing up to the clinic just to kind of manage his wounds so it didn't get worse. And so I remember when we first got in and first talked to him and kind of built up a relationship with him. And he's like, oh, they've tried everything on this stuff. Nothing seems to work, but might as well, new flavor of the month.
Yeah.
It was really cool to be able to kind of see his attitude as he's like, wow, it's looking better.
What was he acting like by the time it was all like healed up? What was he?
Yeah, it's just that at the end of the day, we take for granted what it's like completely healthy. Like I always say that the things that we take for granted are the very things that are the most important in our lives. And that's almost always the case. If you don't think about it, if you got to take it away, and that's our health, that's our home, that's our family, that's our relationships, the freedoms that we enjoy in this country, all those things that are the easiest to take for granted. Those are the things that we don't think about. and we would miss the most that they were taking away. And so when this patient got healed, he's like, I can go swimming, because when you have an open sore, you can't go swimming.
Wow.
You can't have a normal shower. You have to keep it.
Oh man, I didn't even think
And
about that.
and that would be routinely one of the big issues with patients that have old wounds. They're like, I can take a shower. I can get in the swimming water.
Wow.
And so when I'm walking on the beach, I can get in the water.
Yeah.
Like, that was like a big deal.
Amazing. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you forget, that, and a lot of these patients, they might have a sore that's, again, small, might be the size of a quart.
Mhm.
But again, they might not have had a normal shower in a year for a wound the size of the quarter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you get that thing closed, and all of a sudden,
Game changer.
they can have a more normal life. That's a big deal.
That's amazing. Okay, so you're a regional director. You have a team. Now, talk to us about how it's structured with your company. As a regional director, I take it you're at home and in the field with your reps sometimes, or is it a different setup?
So I've been a regional director at 2 different companies, and I've had 2 different experiences depending on the company I'm with. So the company I'm currently with, I'm almost always remote. So just here in my office right here, because I support too many people across the country. How
many people do you support?
So, there's probably about 60 independent agents and distributors that I support, and then also their accounts.
So let's break that down, right? Because a lot of our audience, we have a lot of conversations around what it means to be W-2, what it means to be 1099, what it means to be a distributor. But for your specific nuance, break it down for our audience. What's the setup exactly?
Yeah. So the way it's set up with me, again, that sounds like a lot, but we all know that the 80-20 rule always applies. And when I say the 80-20s, I'm spending 80% of my time with 20% of those people. And so
you say it one more time.
80% of my time with 20% of those contacts. Okay. And so that almost always applies. It's always applied in almost every job that I've been. The 80-20 rule applies. And so I've got these. Let's say there's 60 different reps out there, and those reps will go up to distributors. So in terms of distributorships, I've probably got 8 to 10 distributorships that have reps underneath the distributors. And then based on those distributors and those reps, we have a whole variety of accounts that they all support. And the accounts would be, well over 100.
And these are this one product or a suite of products?
Suite of products. So we have a suite of these amniotic tissue products that I'm referring to now. We also have other products, but the amniotic tissue are the main products. And so we have that suite of products. And so that's what my day-to-day looks like. Is I've got meetings that have different focuses. One is training and supporting the reps that are in the space. So I may have new distributors that we're bringing on. We may have new reps that we're training, helping them understand how the industry works, how the products work, how our systems as a company work. So I work at a company called FYF Medical, and we have specific systems that we have in place that allow our products to be utilized in the simplest and easiest way possible. Okay. And we need to educate them on all of those circumstances. So on one end I'm focusing on the distributors and the independent 1099 reps. And then on the other side, I'm working with the accounts themselves. I'm also kind of viewed as, when you're working with 1099 people, as you probably know, they're usually 1099 people, they don't have the same resources for training and things, because again, if they are going to a training, they're paying for it out of their own pocket. Right. And I'm providing it to them. And it's different from a W-2 job. A W-2 job, they're going to bring those guys in. You're going to go to some training for a week or 2. They're going to have a whole protocol, and they want you to become an expert in and out. When you're working in the 1099 world, you need to know enough to be dangerous. But what you're mostly doing as a 1099 person is you develop relationships with people, and that's what's made you valuable as an independent. And as a 1099 rep, you may rep with multiple products, multiple lines. And that's typically what our 1099 reps do. They sell our stuff, and they sell, stuff from 3 or 4 or 5 other companies out there.
Got it. So go ahead. Are they just showing up and saying, hey, I want to work for you? And you're like, great. Or are you, because they're 1099, are you still finding them where you're responsible for hiring them? Or is it more like anyone's coming and you're vetting them? How does it work?
It's a combination, right? And so we have a common situation. We have bigger distributors. So they're 1099s themselves, but then they have an organization that's around them. And so a common circumstance for us is we'll have distributors that, let's say, work with podiatrists because they have hardware. They have hardware, but they want to diversify their portfolio because they know that podiatrists, again, are foot doctors. And foot doctors often see patients that have foot wounds, and foot wounds are the most common wound that's out there. And so it makes sense for these distributors to have a wound solution in addition to the hardware that they're using in the OR. And so in some circumstances, they'll approach us and say, hey, I want to see if I can work with you. And a lot of circumstances, we'll approach them and be like, hey, would you be interested in widening your portfolio? And so however that relationship happens, at that point, they need to train the people that are on their team, and they're constantly recruiting other people to work with them.
Sure.
And as they recruit other people to work with them, they want them to be trained by the manufacturers or the vendors they work with on their products. And so I'm constantly working with those people to onboard these new reps and show them what the pitch is and how these products work, and basically equip them to be dangerous enough to talk about the products,
right,
and work with the products. And I end up being the subject expert. So if they ever get into a circumstance whether a physician or a clinic is asking higher level questions, they just defer to me. They hook me up with providers, and we handle those tougher questions. Now, in my previous role, I worked for a large vertically integrated company, a company that was structured differently than ours, even though it's in the same space. But we primarily did W-2, and so we were hiring people, going through the entire training process and training every individual person to be as much of an expert as possible.
Right.
So I supported a team of I had about 9 direct employees on that team. And then I also worked with a few 1099 reps as well, but that was the minority. It was kind of an 80% direct, 20% agent.
Let's talk about that for a second, because, there's 1099 and W-2 are in different worlds. So, and it's kind of cool that you've been the manager for both sides.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And remember, I have a customized and personalized program that gets you into the medical technology industry as a sales professional, or any type of role for that matter. Become a top performer in your position and masterfully navigate your career to executive level leadership. Check out these programs and learn more at evolvesuccess.com by visiting our site, filling out an application, schedule some time with one of our account executives, and allowing us to get you where you need to be. Stay tuned for more awesome content with amazing interviews on the Medical Sales Podcast.